Well, they should get rid of all EV subsidies, remove all the tax breaks, benefit in kind, make them stand on their own, and the market will quickly abandon them and everyone will go back to ICE. Have you heard that one? Should they? Will they? And will people really go back to petrol and diesel? The reality is, as so often found, rather different. I'm Dave, this is Dave Takes It On. Let's dig a lot deeper, but click that subscribe button first, please. We need to isolate the dreamers from the realists. Quick example, we've just had a free and fair secret general election in the UK, and we got what we got. There's now a movement, a few months later, that's generated over 2 million signatures calling for a new general election because they don't like the result. Well, there's no chance whatsoever of that happening. We do not call general elections by public opinion. The monarch, in our case the king, still retains the legal right to dissolve the current parliament if requested to by the prime minister. It is therefore the prime minister that has the power to call an election. Well, having been in office only a few weeks and passed very few laws so far, there's no chance of that. Under UK laws, any petitions gaining 10,000 signatures must get a government response, and when they get over 100,000 signatures, the matter can be considered for discussion in Parliament. What exactly did the protesters think was going to happen? Did they really think that they're going to call a general election? Well, exactly the same applies to EVs. Like them or hate them or bitterly believe they are the devil incarnate, it is a fact that many people do like them. Many people already drive them and many more will do so soon. Sales are growing. Whatever the protesters think or believe or hope, for many people, EVs, electric vehicles, are actually an ideal solution. So much better than anything even the very latest petrol or diesel cars can offer. So what are the anti-EV protesters hoping will happen to them? To the people who already have one and love it, do they think, oh, let's suddenly switch, hey, it's no longer any good, I'll get rid of it, I'll go and buy a petrol car? Well, these people are dreamers. Of course, people won't do that. For those people that EVs suit, they love them and will probably buy another EV when the time comes to change. And the number not buying another ICE car, but choosing their first EV, that also is growing. And as the EV technology improves, that number can only increase. EVs are on the rise. Be alert, sales figures are increasing at an amazing pace. It's difficult to keep up to date. October was a record month for EV sales in both the UK and China. Several car markets in the world effectively no longer buy petrol and diesel cars. Norway, it's already about there. China is rapidly heading there. For them, and a growing number of other countries, ICE is already dead. Their future is 100% EV. So in China, more than 50% of all new car sales are now NEVs, new energy vehicles. But the growth of NEV is actually exponential. And the collapse of the ICE sales is also exponential downwards. So from this graph, we can see that as recently as 3 years ago, new car sales were 100% ICE, no NEVs. Today, a mere 3 years later, over 50% of new car sales are NEVs. But the key here is the trend. It is likely in another 3 years, well before the 2030 or 2035, which we in the West are working towards, ICE sales in China will totally dry up. China will go 100% electric. Well, before anyone points out the governments around the world are concerned that EV adoption is not happening fast enough, I totally agree. EV sales are not high enough. But you need to know two things. First, the drop in ICE sales is totally independent of new EV sales. People in increasing numbers are simply stopping buying ICE cars and they're hanging on to their older cars for far longer. Whether or not they buy an EV, they are still buying less ICE cars. Well, second, EV sales are actually still increasing despite what the media says. UK year to date, as at the end of October this year, saw market penetration reach 18.1%, its highest level ever. And the first half of the year, 2024, saw an overall 9.2% growth. China saw a massive jump year on year of 56.7%. And while this does include PHEVs, their share is actually rapidly declining and BEV sales are rapidly increasing. That's full electric. Just not as fast as most governments had hoped. Is the trend likely to reverse? No! The Chinese government has poured billions, probably trillions over the last 20 years into developing the most advanced and largest EV manufacturing centre in the world and been subsidising the manufacturers and buyers to make them even more attractive. Today, nearly half of all new EVs made and sold in the world are Chinese. Does anyone in their right mind think China might just pack it all in, just stop making EVs and go back to buying European or Japanese made ICE cars and then shut down all their EV car factories, their battery factories, and close down the production and the sale of lithium and cobalt and nickel? There is not a chance. So forgetting the EV market for the moment, the ICE market now has a serious problem. Around half of their largest traditional market, China, simply disappeared in the last 3 years. 3 years, gone probably forever. That is scarily rapid. And as we look at other markets around the world, we see an identical story, but at a somewhat slower pace. Every single country in the whole world now has some of their new car market, which is 100% EVs, electric vehicles only. And that sum is growing in most of them. The average around the rest of the world, other than China and Norway, is likely to end up this year somewhere around about 25% of the entire market by the end of the year. And despite numerous locations where sales have collapsed, like Germany, keep getting told, Germany, sales have collapsed. The trend is still projected to exceed 45% market penetration in 2025. Yeah, German sales collapsed, but Chinese sales increased to the highest level ever in October, and year on year, sales are also up dramatically. A tiny blip like German EVs, public buying slightly less EVs, it barely registers. In plain English, the total top 3 largest new car markets in the world, China, USA and America, representing about 80% of the whole world new car sales in 2023, just lost millions of ICE sales forever in 2024. Even in America, which got off to a slow start, today they're only 9% of new car sales are EVs. They will have seen over 1 million ICE sales disappear. It's a truly shocking figure. Certainly some of them who bought an EV will go back to driving a petrol or diesel car when it comes time to change it. But many more who are currently driving a petrol or diesel car will switch to an EV. And that rate will increase as the EV technology gets better. If price is a major stumbling block, which it is, new cheaper EVs will eventually enter the market. If range anxiety is stopping some, then the next generation of EVs, or the next, with new batteries, they're already appearing on the market, and they've got more than 500 miles of range. If public charging infrastructure is holding them back, the new rules, well, certainly here in the UK, about curbside chargers supplied by councils, plus a massive expansion of public rapid and ultra-rapid chargers elsewhere, will eventually convince them to say, hey, let's have another look. In other words, approaching half the ICE market has already gone, and the remainder is actually continuing to shrink at a faster and faster pace. Well, in business terms, hard facts show that exactly the same number of legacy auto factories, operated by Toyota, Renault, Ford, GM and the rest, are all trying to sell exactly the same number of new cars as they did 5 years ago, maybe even more, to a customer base that is now half the previous size. In a worst case scenario, that's the obvious outcome. All legacy auto will sell half as many new ICE and hybrid cars. Well, a quick check on the stock market, and this is what the markets seem to be pricing in. Apart from General Motors, they're a bit of an outlier, they're bucking the trend, but all the other shares are seriously crashing in value, meaning that the markets do not see them as a good investment in the short to mid-term. But the reality is even more serious, in fact terminal. This is something called economy of scale. If you build a factory, you'll equip it and employ workers to operate it, and you're buying enough raw materials to make your products. And if you're only ever going to make a single product ever, then the cost of making that single item is obviously many millions. It's the cost of the factory and the workers and components, everything, energy bills, the whole lot. If, on the other hand, the same factory makes tens of millions of items per year for many years into the future, the cost of building that factory can be spread over tens or hundreds of millions of items, and that cost per item could be down to a few pounds or often down to just fractions of a penny. Well, likewise with labour, a full workforce to make one item ever means the entire labour cost is huge and it applies to that one item. Whereas spread that cost, the labour cost, between millions of items a year, it could be really trivial. Now, in all these cases, the final price of the item and the profit of the company generally depends on mass production. There are exceptions. Rolls-Royce, a classic example, both cars and jet engines. They do make a relative handful of products, but then they can charge an outrageously high price. In the mass market, which is where legacy auto is, if the output and sales are halved, some of those costs can easily, effectively be more than doubled, totally wiping out some or even all of the profit. Most factories will have been designed and built, and the products made will have been priced based on a specific minimum output or turnover. Halving that output or turnover is simply not an option. We're starting to see this exact phenomenon with VW, BMW, Mercedes, Stellantis, even Toyota. Factories, the first operated on reduced shifts. Then the factories switched to closing totally at weekends. Then workers start getting laid off. Finally, factories no longer needed and no longer financially viable are sold off. Or at least they try to sell them. There's not a raging market for them. This is already happening. The traditional market's gone. Is there a way to survive? Well, yeah. In fact, it's really easy. Oh, by the way, if you're enjoying this, please just stop and subscribe before you carry on. Well, you as a legacy auto manufacturer, you just need to make sure that you make and sell as many ICE cars as you always have done. This will require you to grab the share that your competitors are targeting. Sod them, this is serious. We're going to grab twice our fair share. Sorry if you go bust, we're going to thrive and make a profit. Well, the trouble is, as all you business experts out there will have noticed, that's exactly what your competitors are already doing to you. They want your share, fair or not, so they can make a profit and they can survive. And obviously, for all you mathematical geniuses out there, they can't all survive. Unless the ICE market suddenly doubles, then less than half of legacy auto will survive. And next year, the market will shrink a little bit further. So those of you who survive this year may not make it through next year. But then you find it's just the start of a vicious downward exponential spiral. The oil companies making your petrol and diesel, they'll find that all those who've already bought or leased an EV are no longer customers. Most will never return, meaning that they will be selling less petrol and diesel than what they planned to sell. And each month and year that passes, their customer base shrinks. Maybe slowly, maybe quite quickly, but it will shrink until it becomes unprofitable to make petrol and diesel at the prices we now enjoy. Future prices must rise. And as the price of petrol and diesel rises, so the economy of owning and driving an EV starts looking better and better. This is also a vicious spiral downwards, rising diesel and petrol prices driving people to buy EVs because now they're much cheaper to run. Well, I know I'm going to get a torrent of comments stating I'm wrong, so please cut out the rhetoric, abuse and insults. I'm not causing this, I'm reporting this. Please instead explain how, with the Chinese ICE new car market representing about 40% of the world total, effectively totally closing for business, certainly already, but in the next few years, all the existing legacy auto factories, how they can survive and why most of them are already reducing shifts big time and offloading factories that are no longer needed. And no, these are not old ones that they're replacing because that demand is high. These are closing to reduce output overall for the company or the group, because all legacy auto financial statements in Q3 2024 are reporting the same thing: a reduced volume of ICE car sales for the rest of 2024 and 2025. They have a higher turnover, but that's because they're jackier prices, but the volume is decreasing. Anyway, leave your comments. I have been saying for well over a year in repeated videos, it is not EVs taking over that will drive the transformation to renewable energy vehicles. It's the loss of sales of the old technology, new ICE cars, that will do that. Once again, plain English, people are already stopping buying ICE and are hanging on to their existing cars for much longer, until either the scrap or until EVs become a better, cheaper solution. For many, that day's already been and gone. They've already bought or leased their first EV, and for others, they will hang out a few more years. Few, in my opinion, are going to survive holding out more than 10 years. It's important to believe that I'm not saying that all cars on the road in 10 years' time will be EVs. They won't. They will still be ICE cars that will just linger maybe another 10, 20 or 30 years beyond that. If you want to doubt that, just check Auto Trader. Fancy a 1930s Morris? I don't. I'm Dave.